Welcome everyone to Train Tuesday. I am your host Jim Wiggins. So glad to have you here. If you are watching us on the live stream, thank you for joining us. Likewise, if you've caught us on our YouTube channel, thanks for finding us there. Now, if you like the content that you see on our YouTube channel, do me a favor, like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you're notified of future videos that get dropped to our YouTube channel. Now let's do what we always do on the live stream. Let's see who's joining us here tonight. I see Kyle, Jason, Glenn, Eric, Donnie, John, Delta 9, Kyle, UP 8515, Jason, Jerry, Raymond, George, Jackie, and Matthew, just to name a few. So glad that you guys could join us tonight. We're going to be talking Athearn HO. Specifically, we're going to be talking about SD40s and those SD40s that have been rebuilt. Certainly a really interesting locomotive, certainly a locomotive that has seen many railroads colors painted over it over the years. So we're going to be talking about those, and we're going to have locomotives painted up as they were originally delivered all the way to present day. So we've got some cool stuff to show you. We're also going to be talking about those 40-foot modernized boxcars. So if you want to model something a little bit newer than the 1950s and you're strapped for space and you really want to get some switching action, let's look at the 1960s and 70s for that. And we're going to show you these modernized boxcars that actually lived in some cases up into the 80s. So let's do one more round of shout outs. I see BNSF 9708, Robert, Daniel, Donnie, Michael, Lucas, David, Rick, Terry, Glenn, and many, many more. Thank you for joining us tonight. I do appreciate it. And without further ado, let's start talking about the 6-axle EMD SD40. Now, this SD40 that I'm showing you here, this was a rebuild actually. But it's the model that we're going to be talking about tonight. And I wanted to show you what the actual model looks like. That way, if you're not familiar with the SD40 that we produce under the Athearn, formerly the Ready to Roll line, you have a pretty good idea of what it is. Now let's go back to 1966. This is when EMD updated its locomotive catalog with entirely new models, and one of which were the powered by the 645 diesel engine was the SD40. Now, this model had 3,000 horsepower from a turbocharged V16. Now, out of all of these locomotives that were built, 856 examples of this locomotive were built for American railroads. Likewise, 330 were built for Canadian railroads and 72 were built for Mexican railroads. Certainly a very good selling locomotive, and we would see it later on get its Dash 2 components and become an SD40-2. But believe it or not, these original straight 40s, if you will, lived on throughout the 60s, 70s, 80s, even into modern era. A lot of these have been rebuilt for current needs. And we're going to see a little bit of that today when we start with what we're offering. Now, what I'm going to be showing you tonight, everything that I show you that is an illustration, those models will be available for pre-order until Friday, May 26th. So again, this model that you see on your screen here, we announced this back in 2021. They were available for sale in hobby shops in 2022, actually about this time last year. You might still be able to find that if you really like that Utah belt. You might be able to find that with some online dealers or some online auctions. But let's go ahead and show you what we're offering this month. We're going to start with BNSF. Now, BNSF SD40 numbers 7300, 7333, and 7339. They're former Canadian National and Grand Trunk Western locomotives. They were converted to SD40-2 standards by Alstom at Point St. Charles, and they were on a 10-year lease from Newcourt Capital USA. Now, they were released for service between the dates of 9/1/99 all the way through to October 12th of 1999. And so we're offering these three locomotives that you can see here. And for you guys that are modeling the early BNSF stuff, you're going to want to pick these heritage ones up. These look absolutely stunning. Some of the features of these three locomotives. Again, these are former CN and Grand Trunk units. They were rebuilt in the late 1990s and they are classified as an SD40-2. So externally, they look like an SD40, but classification wise, because of the rebuild process, they are SD40-2s. They're all going to feature the K3L long horn on the long hood, Sinclair antennas, 4,000 gallon fuel tanks, snow shields. I mean, come on, we're talking Canadian roads here. Operating front ditch lights, Canadian style vertical rear headlight, twin air reservoirs, and snowplow. So these are really unique locomotives, and no doubt as to the lineage of these locomotives, despite this really cool Heritage One paint scheme. Coming up next, it was time to do some Kodachrome. Now, Southern Pacific instituted a rebuild program of their SD40s in 1980 to 1981. The units were updated to Dash 2 electrical standards, as well as receiving electrical cabinet air filters just behind the cab on the fireman's side. They were placed in the 7300 number series. Now, a few of these units actually received the attractive red and yellow paint scheme of the proposed Southern Pacific Santa Fe merger, which combined the scarlet of the Southern Pacific with the Santa Fe yellow. Now, the merger was subsequently denied in 1986, but the repainted units lasted all the way up into the 1990s in some cases. So here we have, as they appeared new, we're going to say just around 86, we have units number 7303, 7357, and 7384. Now, features just for these three locomotives, these are going to be SP class SD40Rs for rebuilds based on the rebuilds of 1980 to 1981. They're all going to feature the Nathan P3 horn. They're all going to have the 4,000 gallon fuel tank, and they will have the rebuilt L-shaped front windows that SP was known for. Of course, SP light packages front and rear, extended range dynamic brakes, large front plow with angled cut levers, and the SP toolbox on the left-hand walkway. All spotting features of SP. Guys on the East Coast, don't lose hope. I have some Conrail for you, but not just any kind of Conrail, early Conrail. Now, we all know that it was formed in 1976. It took over the operations of a variety of Eastern railroads that were, quite frankly, failing. Conrail inherited an incredible variety of motive power from the obscure units such as a single, get this, a single GE 44 tonner and a group of Reading VO1000s with EMD prime movers to the more conventional power such as GP38s and SD40s. The task of integrating this massive fleet was substantial. To minimize downtime in the shops, the components road numbers units were often received a simple patch job and new Conrail numbers, as was done on these SD40s. You can kind of see that. These are prime for grime. You can see they just hastily applied some black paint. They put the markings on and they put the numbers on and they sent them out. And don't forget, these units weren't really all that old when Conrail took over. As some of the newest and most reliable power available at the startup, the SD40s continued in service on the mountainous regions and heavy haul applications, but they did make appearances in other services as well. Here we've got 6242, 6254, and 6261. Now, we're going to bleed over a little bit on the features for these, but for the Conrail features, what you're going to need to know, these are former Penn Central units. The front plow and removed rear footboards and other details as far as what the PC units have are in the following release. We're going to talk about those in a moment. Let's go back a little bit, a few years, and let's go to the mid-60s. And this is one we haven't offered in a while. We got a lot of requests for Chesapeake and Ohio. And in 1966, EMD delivered what would be the first of 5 orders of SD40s to the C&L Railroad. The most powerful units on the road at that time, they had a total weight of 394,000 pounds each, and they could exert 82,100 pounds of continuous tractive effort at 11.1 miles per hour. That's pretty impressive. Units 7450 to 7469, depicted here, were delivered in the 35 style paint scheme with the yellow noses and small side initials. I don't know about you, but Kind of reminds me of a current Class 1 paint scheme, but I really like this. So we've got CNO number 7451, 7457, and 7459 in this lineup. And some of the features for the CNO SD40s, they're going to have low brake cylinders, Leslie S3L horn on the cab, extended range dynamic brakes, front and rear footboards, and pilot grabs, a 4,000-gallon fuel tank, whip antenna, clear wind deflectors. And the model represents the first CNO SD40 order only group with the yellow noses. This is the first time we've offered this since we revised the tooling back in 2014. So CNO fans, here's your chance to get something that we haven't done in quite a while and haven't done since they've been retooled. So I said there was some Penn Central in here. And like I said earlier in the month, Penn Central fans, this is definitely your month. Now, these were built in late 1970, and in early 1971, this group of SD40s were delivered new to the Penn Central, but were similar to the units inherited from the Pennsy. As some of the newest and most reliable units on the roster, they were usually found in almost any type of service, but they are more frequently found on the mountainous territory between Pittsburgh and Harrisburg, the latter being their assigned maintenance base. Now, here we've got Penn Central number 6243, 6257, and 6262. So here are more of the features, and remember, these are going to end up as Conrail locomotives. Here's some of those features. They're going to have the as-delivered configuration with the footboard pilots, front and rear pilot grabs, Leslie RS3L low clearance horn, 4,000-gallon fuel tank, extended range dynamic brakes, of course, ACI labels, short hood with grab iron located on the left side, and a cab signal box. So Penn Central fans, you've got until Friday, May 26th to make these into your roster for next year. And next, here's one that we got some requests for. It's the Fort Worth and Western. Interesting railroad. The Fort Worth and Western Railroad began in 1988 with the purchase of 6.25 miles of track from former Burlington Northern Railroad. It now owns 276 miles of track. The Fort Worth and Western Railroad interchanges with three Class 1 railroads, the Union Pacific, the BNSF, and was Kansas City Southern, in Fort Worth, as well as the short line railroad, Texas Pacifico, at San Anglo Junction. It is apparent that the Fort Worth and Western takes pride in its locomotive fleet. Each unit has an individual name, and their website lists descriptive details of each roster member. For example, Fort Worth and Western 2029 and 2030 are SD40s rebuilt to SD40-2 standards and are named Eastland County and Dallas County, respectively. Pretty cool. So here we have modern day locomotives. These are as they appeared in 2020. And we're offering both 2029 and 2030. The features on these guys, they're going to have ditch lights on both ends, rear brake wheel, 5-chime horn, dual RV air conditioners, and a large front plow. Now here's one that we get a lot of requests for, and maybe frankly a lot of you guys didn't think we were going to do it, but guess what? We did. We did an undecorated for you guys. We had a lot of requests for undecorated locomotives, and an SD40 is a great model for that since they were used all over. And it's not hard to believe that some of these would find their ways onto some smaller short lines repainted into their family colors. So these are based primarily on the PC Conrail units on this release, but they're going to include both non-dynamic and dynamic parts within the undecorated model. They're going to be fully assembled but ready for painting, and additional detail parts may be available through your favorite retailer. So if there's certain antennas, horns, things of that nature, fortunately for us, there are still plenty of companies out there that offer those detail parts. If you want to do a quick web search, if you're new to this, you could definitely look those up and find them. If you still are running into some roadblocks and you want to find some detail parts, talk to your dealer. They carry those parts and they can usually get those parts to you pretty easily. So generally, all across the board, all of these SD40s, let's talk about the features real quick. Of course, all of these are going to have LED lighting. They're going to have photo etched stainless steel windshield wipers, separately applied wire grab irons and air tanks, curved radiator fan grab iron, coupler cut levers, rubber MU hoses. Of course, you're going to have a see-through cab window, dynamic brakes, and radiator fans. Now, one of the things I want to let you know is, does the cab have an interior? No, it does not. That is a Genesis feature. However, a lot of guys have successfully scratch built some really nice interiors for these locomotives. But again, these are Athearn HO. They're going to have frame mounted bells unless otherwise noted, a detailed 4,000 gallon fuel tank, Plexicoil C trucks with high or low brake cylinders per the prototype, all-wheel drive with precision gears for smooth and quiet operation, all-wheel electrical pickup provides reliable current flow, DCC ready. It's going to feature the quick plug and plug and play technology with a 21-pin NEM connector. Wheels, of course, are RP25 contours, so they'll operate on all brands of track. If you want to know what the minimum radius is on this guy, believe it or not, you can run these on a radius of 18 inches, which is really good for a 6-axle. Recommended radius, though, is 22 inches. Now, these are available both with and without sound. If you go DCC ready route, you're looking at an MSRP of $174.99. If you go with the Soundtracks decoder, that's going to include the Economy decoder. That's going to go for $244.99. Again, that is MSRP. Contact your dealer for your price. So there you have it, the SD40s. I'm going to go ahead and see if anybody has any questions on the SD40s, and then we'll go on to the 40-foot boxcars. CRSR-840B says, thanks, Athearn, for letting us know about the minimum curve radiuses. I really appreciate that. I'm sure you're not the only one. I know myself, I am as well, because some of us have, including myself, pretty tight quarters. It's cool to see these locomotives, but we want to see where they're actually going to function. Let's see. I'm seeing some questions about, are these going to have factory installed speakers? No, these will not have factory installed speakers. They will come either as a pure silent DC, DCC ready, or the version with the Soundtracks Economy. Let's see. DG Model Works says, I said it before, but the Retro Roll are such a good deal and a great value. Hey, thanks, DG. If you, which does remind me, head on over to his channel. He actually reviewed the SD40-2s that are in stock right now at your dealer. Now, the SD40-2s, even though they're Athearn, remember that chip shortage we had a couple of years ago? Well, we introduced the SD40-2s in the Athearn line, but this time they had a Tsunami. So if you want a really cool sounding Tsunami 2 SD40-2, head over to your dealer now. You can also check out the Athearn website and check out DG Model Works after this program to see his really good and in-depth review on the SD40-2s. Again, those are available now if you want to grab one. Let's see. I thought I saw a Penn Central question. Yes, Jim, there's Conrail. We went over that. Remember, they're former Penn Central. They are still in black, and they've been patched over for Conrail. So early Conrail. If you're looking for the later Conrail, I don't have any of those. However, good news for you, we are offering those SD40s in Undecorated, and they are based on the Penn Central / Conrail version. So get yourself some airbrush paint and some decals, and you can make it your own. Jamie wants to know, will there be high hood versions in the future? I'm sure there will be, just nothing in this run. Just depends on what roads we are offering. Now, if you like those high hood 6-axles, the SD40-2s that we have available right now, the Norfolk Southern ones, since they're based on former Southern units, are high hoods, and they look really cool. Robert wants to know, will they have weight provisions for the speakers? Well, generally the way Athearn and Genesis locomotives are designed, that's a module. If you have a non-sound setup, that module is just a weight. You just remove that. You can mill that if you want to accept the speaker of your choice. But for the most part, that's a separate unit. It gives you a little bit of flexibility and freedom. If you just go with a silent DC, it's just a lead, or not a lead, but just a solid steel weight. If you want to put speakers in there, you've got a little bit of room, because if it was a sound equipped locomotive, those little speaker boxes would already be in that steel piece. Sharpest turnouts the SD40s can run on without trouble. Well, I wouldn't go any less than probably a 6, number 6 turnout. I mean, that's pretty much an industrial turnout in the real world. And that's really usually for 4 axles in the real world. However, in the modeling world, you can get by with that. Just make sure you check all of your wheel sets to an NMRA gauge before going off on that. Definitely nothing smaller than a 6, though, in my opinion. All right, one more question, and then we're going to go on to the 40-foot boxcars. Jim, no worries. Just catch us on the YouTube, and you'll see us talk a little bit about those Conrail units. Last question from Daniel. Any ready-to-roll SD40-2s with DCC sound and Seaboard system family lines paint schemes to come in the near future? I don't know about the near future, possibly in the future, but not that I know of in the near future. Jake here says, I bet they do Pico number 5s, no problem. Probably. Those are quite well-engineered turnouts. All right, let's change from motive power to cargos. So like I was saying earlier in the program, if you have got a small shelf style layout, you want to maximize your switching potential, and you don't have room for modern day 60-foot and larger freight cars, you don't have room for those big 6-axle locomotives that are now doing switching jobs, which just kind of amazes me. If you're not really too keen on late steam, early transition, and you want to do something a little bit different, consider the 1960s and 1970s, and here's why. Now, to better enhance crew safety, in 1968, the AAR legislated the removal of roof walks. The 40-foot boxcars need to be modernized to adhere to the AAR mandate. This had to be completed by 1978 for cars in interchange service, any car that was going to go outside their immediate home road. Some of these cars had side and end ladders cut down, and in some cases, modifications included lowering the brake wheel. What made the boxcars great, at least in the eyes of the railroad, was their ability to haul about anything. Railroads thrive, of course, on redundancy to maximize efficiency. So think about this for a second. Your railroad is in the mid-60s. This new mandate comes down that we have to remove the roof walks. We want the grab irons and the ladders cut down, and in some cases, even lower the brake wheel. The thing that's really interesting about this, you really have to look at the prototype before you can see all the modifications that were done. In some cases, the roof walks were removed, but the brake wheel still remained in the original place up high. In other cases, you had a mishmash of modifications. Sometimes it was done by the railroad. Now, the great thing about these cars is the railroad didn't have to buy new cars. They just simply had to modify these cars. And while they were in the shops getting all this modification, they tended to modernize their paint schemes. So they transitioned from the old mineral reds and the browns and went to these flashier, more modern looking paint schemes that we're going to talk about here. Now, all of these box cars that I'm showing you today, and we've got quite a few to look at, they're going to be available as 2 different singles as well as a 3-pack. And the good thing about those is if your home road is being shown, you have the possibility of 5 freight cars with totally different freight numbers. So here we have Union Pacific. This is a 1960s paint scheme. Burlington Northern, of course, in the Cascade Green has to be 1970s. And of course, Southern in a 1960s paint scheme. All of these paint schemes are really indicative of that era. Remember, a lot of railroads by the mid to late 60s were kind of changing their image, everything from the font of their logo to the actual look of the logo. And these here, I said Southern, and I apologize, that is CP Rail. And that is actually 1970s. So we want to show the Southern now because I talked about the Southern. So there it is. And I've always loved this boxcar. Gives a green light. Speaking of cars that I'm familiar with, here's Maine Central. Maine Central had a fleet of these, both new and, of course, like this. This is 8050, and again, this would be appropriate for 1960s. Now, just because we say 1960s doesn't mean you can't use these into the 70s. A lot of these, after they've been modernized, lasted quite a while. Really, the thing that kind of did them in was the per diem that program that we saw come later into the 1970s, and we've talked about that on different programs. But 60s and 70s, these guys were everywhere, especially in these paint schemes. Here's the RF&P version. This is a 1960s paint scheme. Really bold colors, too, that we're getting at this time. And here we go. Some more stuff for you guys that are getting Conrail and Penn Central stuff. There's no reason why you can't get something in here. Here we have the NDM 66937. This is a 1960s paint scheme, and pretty much all of these on this page are 1960s. We've got the Santa Fe in that brilliant red, just really nice. Remember, before this, they were pretty much a boxcar red color, and they went to this bright red in the 60s. Really colorful car. And then, of course, New York Central with their jade green. That was really something that would pop out amongst those more earth tone cars of the time. Moving on, not all the cars were bright colors. A lot of the railroads stayed somewhat conservative. Here we've got the SP191072. This is a 1960s paint scheme. Canadian National. While it does have the brown scheme, this is more their more modern look. You can tell by the font. You can see the wet noodle style of the CN logo. This is car number 577064. This is a 1970s car. And last but not least, we've got the Frisco. 27025 is this car number. And this is a 1970s car. And the last two in the lineup, we've got the MKT 5573 1970s. And this is a cool paint scheme. I really like this. It's bright, and it's definitely going to stand out in a yard. And then, of course, Seaboard Airline 24620. This is a 1970s paint job. So, like I said, if you've got a smaller layout, you can get a couple of these 40 footers into a small industry spur without any issues. And it just makes operations all that much more fun. Also, remember, too, the 1960s, 1970s, it was a time for transition. So if you're one of those folks that's like, man, I don't really know if I want to model Burlington Northern or CB&Q or Great Northern, well, the good thing is these railroads that were formed in the late 60s throughout the 1970s, they didn't paint their equipment overnight. So it really gives you an opportunity to try different locomotives on your switching layout, and they can be plausible. So the details that go for this whole band of these 40 footers, they're all going to have underbody with brake system details. All of them include metal machined wheels. They're all weighted to NMRA standards. The wheels, of course, are RP25 contours. And the minimum radius on these, you've probably guessed it, 18 inches. So perfect for a tight, smaller layout. Now, these are going to sell for $34.99 MSRP individually, as well as the 3-pack. You can get those for $99.99. Check your dealer for your price. That is full MSRP. So with that, I want to remind you, All your pre-orders are due Friday, May 26th, 2023. It may seem like that's a couple of weeks away and you've got more time than you think, but it's going to come quick. That's the problem with summer too. For me anyways, time just seems to fly between May and September. So don't wait on these. You're going to want to get those pre-orders in before you forget. And with that, I'm going to take a few questions and then I'm going to let you guys get back to your layout, your modules, or whatever's on your workbench. So let's see what kind of questions we have. Let's see. I just saw a question from Dave. What happened to the retooled railguns that were announced at Amherst and nowhere to be found on the website? Well, they're technically on the website, but since it is artist renderings, you're not going to see all that retooling. As John explained in an episode not too long ago, there have been times where we've announced something and the tooling needs to be adjusted for age. And that was one of those cases. John figures if he's already in there doing those tweaks, you might as well do some other extra effort. It's not going to cost any more. So while he was into those railguns, he did some more modifications. I believe he had a sample at the show. And you're not going to see anything on the website, but as we get closer, the guys will probably be sending me some pre-production sample images, as well as they might just show up in the studio one day and you'll see them on the website. Let's see. What's other? Todd says pricing is very affordable. Yeah, that's the other good thing about these. They're not going to have the detail level as a Genesis. But if you're somebody that's part of a modular club or you just like to do operations and you're going to have a bunch of guys over and you're not quite comfortable with somebody doing operations with a really super detailed freight car, these are perfect for that. We also wanted to make that price point economical for you because, again, they're just perfect for the modular type clubs out there as well as operations. George with some interesting historical data. It says, Jim, the Pennsylvania Railroad, Penn Central, and Conrail had two versions of the SD40s. That's correct. The other version had the handbrake lever in the nose. Will we do them in the future? It's possible. Now, since we've already done Penn Central and Conrail, we'll probably give that road a rest for a little bit, but it's pretty conceivable to think that in the not too distant future, we'll probably do those versions. Late Night Model Railroading is commenting, I might need to liven up my switching layout with a couple of these 40 footers. Will be refreshing to see shorter rolling stock for a change. If you've not seen Late Night Model Railroading's YouTube channel and you like that type of content, definitely go over there. He's got a couple of different switching layouts that he has built or is in the process of building in both HO and N scale. And he's absolutely right. The 1970s was an interesting time, 1960s and 1970s for that matter, because you could still see 40-foot boxcars painted in new colors with slightly different features, and you could see railroads from any number of former parent railroads, and definitely a good time. I mean, if you model early Burlington Northern or early Conrail, you're going to see a rainbow of colors. Let's see what else we've got. I'm seeing some comments for what you guys would like to see produced. Remember, anytime there's something or some road that you want to see produced, please shoot us an email. That's Athearn _ product suggestions, or I'm sorry, hyphen product suggestions at athearn.com. Randall Ellison has definitely picked up on what I'm putting down. He says, I don't mind less detail, less stuff to break off. Yeah, absolutely. You know, in the times that I've taken really nicely detailed models to a meet, to a show, those details end up somewhere in a foam box, foam layered box. And who usually is the person that's responsible for such breakage? This guy right here. With these box cars, you can take them out into a public setting, especially you modular guys, and enjoy the look of a nice box car, nice freight car. And let's be honest, Most people that are just visiting the train show, they're not going to know that that cut lever is not there. Let's see. I got time for a couple of more questions, and then I'm going to let you guys get back to it. Anthony wants to know, are the Penn Central prime for grime like the Conrail? No, they're going to look a little bit newer. So basically, those locomotives, the Penn Central will look as they did when they were new. If you look at the Conrail version, especially if you look at the artwork on our website, you can tell these are former Penn Central by the slightly different saturation of black over where the logos used to be. So the Conrail ones will be prime for grime. The Penn Central will be more of an as delivered. All right. John Robert Fox says, go back to steel handrails. Well, we get that comment a lot. Actually, we're not going to go back to that. There's a lot of reasons for it. But for the biggest reason that we went to it's an engineering type plastic. The biggest reason why we did that is so they don't break or bend. And Robert, if you saw my collection of old blue box, let's just say the Penn Central on its worst day looks better than the handrails I've got in my old blue box. They just bent so easily. There was a lot of guys out there that could do a really good job with a soldering iron putting those things together. But for durability, cost, and for just overall looks and scale detail, the silicone plastic that we use is going to be what we use from here on out until some new technology comes along. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to let you guys get back to it. So glad that you could join us tonight. Looks like we had a good crowd. So don't forget those SD40-2s that I'm talking about with the Tsunami. That's the only time you're going to see those with the Tsunami 2s is right now at your dealer. A lot of lines that we represented. I missed out on the Chessies. They're already sold out from my avenues, but check your local dealer, check your favorite dealer online. And while you're online, go ahead and go over to DG Model Works. Check out that brand new review of the Norfolk Southern SD40-2 high hood, former Southern. Really cool. Until next time, everyone out there, I want you all to be happy, be healthy, do some good modeling, and above all, high greens. Good night, everyone.